Are mealtimes starting to feel a little bit like a battle of the wills between you and your picky eater? The good news is that you are not alone, and I know that it's exhausting, and I know that it feels personal, but it isn't. You're trying to do the best for your kid. You want to make sure that they are meeting all of the guidelines and that you are giving them the most nutritious meals. But when you put things down on the table, it is met with refusal. It feels personal. Again, I know that it can feel personal, and it can leave you questioning everything, your parenting included. But here's the thing. Picky eating is actually more common than you think, and it is not a reflection of your abilities as a parent. For many kids, picky eating is actually a normal developmental phase. And factors like temperament and sensory sensitivities, or even the natural desire for control, can play a role in kids being perceived as, labeled as, acting as picky eaters. But here's the good news. You can help your child expand their palate without bribing, without pressuring, or without feeling like you are losing any kind of mealtime battle. Today, I want to share some evidence-based strategies and my C.H.A.T.T framework that can help make this process feel less overwhelming and a lot more manageable. And really what I want to do is provide a structure, a framework you can use to systematically introduce foods to your kids and give them the confidence they need to let go of the interest in being a picky eater and be a more willing participant in mealtime. Okay, so why does this matter at all? Picky eating isn't just a frustrating behavior that we have to deal with as parents. It can actually have a ripple effect on your family because you're not just worried about whether they're getting enough of the right things, enough of the right nutrients, enough of the right foods, whether you're creating these habits, but at the same time, it's also causing you to have to navigate stress and tension that picky eating can bring to the table for everyone. For some families, it even affects how often they feel like sitting down together as a family, which there is some evidence to suggest has a really powerful effect on building positive relationships with kids and building lifelong healthy habits. But addressing picky eating isn't about reaching some level of or definition of perfection. Really, it's about building trust, it's about creating consistency, and it is about establishing and building on habits that will help your child approach food and mealtime with curiosity rather than resistance. That is what we're aiming for today. So what are these evidence-based strategies that we can use to help our kids overcome picky eating? The first is repeated exposures. It's easy to think, I've offered broccoli a bunch of times, and they have rejected it every single time. They must not like broccoli. They will never like broccoli. I should just stop trying. But the problem with giving up after a few tries is that the research tells us kids need to be exposed to a food over and over and over again, on average 15 times, before it becomes something that they know and that they will willingly eat. And so the key is to keep offering those foods without pressure and in a variety of different ways. Evidence-based strategy number 2 that you can use to help your kids overcome picky eating, and that is modeling. Your kids are watching you all the time, whether you think they are or not. They are quite perceptive. And if they see you trying a new food and enjoying a variety of foods, they are also more likely to follow suit. This doesn't mean that you need to make a big production out of, oh, I'm trying this new food and look at me loving it. Isn't it amazing? That's not what it means. Really, just calmly eating what is on your plate and showing genuine enjoyment in what you are eating and in trying something new is all that's necessary. And actually, it's also a good idea to demonstrate trying a new food that you don't like and demonstrating what to do when you don't like those foods and a willingness to try it again later. Strategy number 3 is exploring food regularly. Trying new foods doesn't have to start with actually eating it. In fact, for some kids, eating is the very last step in this process of being exposed time and time again. They might need to be comfortable with the idea of the food first by exploring it in lots of other ways and with other senses. Giving your kids an opportunity to touch a food, even in its raw form. Giving them an opportunity to smell it, to feel it, possibly to taste it, but without the expectation of eating. All of these opportunities to explore a food can help familiarize them with it and get them a little bit more comfortable with ultimately eating it. Evidence-based strategy number 4 is choice and autonomy. Picky eating often stems from your child's desire to feel in control. Offering them a say in what is on their plate can go a long way in reducing their resistance to whatever it is that you're offering. The key to doing this is to offer them choices that are within certain boundaries that you are comfortable with. For example, instead of giving them carte blanche, what is it you'd like for dinner? You might give them an option of one or another. Would you like carrots or cucumbers with your meal? This helps to keep options healthy and within some bounds that you agree with or that you're comfortable with, while also giving them a sense of ownership. I would argue it's also a good idea sometimes to give them the carte blanche option. What would you like us to have for dinner? Showing your kids that you value their opinion and that you're willing to make the foods that they like also goes a long way in building trust, which ultimately will help if they are at all afraid of trying new foods. Evidence-based strategy number 5 for dealing with picky eating. This is especially important for you parents who are listening. That is to celebrate small wins. It's really easy during this process to focus, they didn't eat the broccoli again, and to just be focused on that negative outcome. But progress comes in very small and subtle ways sometimes. So maybe they didn't eat the broccoli, but did they let you put it on the plate with the rest of their food? Did they touch it? Did they smell it? Those are small wins that are worth celebrating. And it's also worth identifying things that are outside of the act of eating. Did they sit at the table for a minute longer than they did yesterday? Did they engage in conversation with you all at the table? Were they willing to help clear their plate and they hadn't done that before? All of these things related to food and mealtime and healthy habits and engaging in our family, those are all wins that are worth celebrating. And those are small steps along the way that can help you feel better and more energized and more willing to stick to this in the long term. So all of these strategies are really powerful on their own. And again, there's a lot of evidence that these are things we can do to help our kids overcome picky eating. But they're more effective when you use them as part of a system and you systematize and have a framework for how to actually implement these evidence-based strategies in your own home and in your day-to-day practice. And that is why I created a framework that I call the C.H.A.T.T framework. It is a simple and consistent approach you can use to help your picky eater feel more comfortable with food over time. So let's talk about what C.H.A.T.T is. Here is what it stands for. C. The C in C.H.A.T.T stands for choices. So as we just mentioned above, it's really important that giving your kids choice can help them feel more in control, which makes them less likely to push back. As I mentioned earlier, give them 2 or 3 options that you are comfortable with and let them decide. It's a simple way to reduce tension and encourage participation. So choice. H in C.H.A.T.T stands for habits. Consistency is king. When kids know what to expect, like regular meal times and regular snack times, they feel more secure. This helps reduce grazing and the constant requests we get for snacks, which can interfere with their appetite. And so when it comes time for dinner, they're not as hungry and less willing to try new foods. And all of that ultimately, again, affects their willingness to try new foods. So if you can, to the extent that you can, try to establish predictable mealtime routines and snack routines and stick to that as much as you're able, even on those busy days. A stands for access. Kids can't try what they can't see. So make those healthy food options or the options that you want your kids to be practicing available and accessible. Keep fruit on the counter where they can easily grab it. We keep on the door of our refrigerator jars with a little bit of water in the bottom and cut up carrots. My kids love carrots, and this was an easy way, especially when they were younger and weren't able to peel and cut themselves, to have those foods easily available and for them to be the first things that they see when they open up that refrigerator. These foods are a part of your child's and your everyday environment. They become less intimidating, they become a little bit more familiar, and they become the easy option. So give your kids access to the foods you want to encourage them to be eating. The first T in C.H.A.T.T then stands for taste testing. Encourage your kids, again, without pressuring or requiring it, but encourage your kids to try even the tiniest little taste of something, especially if it's something that they're unfamiliar with. Sometimes even just licking the food, as crazy and gross as that might sound, is actually a really big first step. If you have a truly reluctant eater, sometimes it is just that fear of putting that food near their mouth that they need to overcome. So remember, the key to this is keeping it low pressure. You might say something like, oh, you don't have to eat it, but would you like just a tiny little taste to see what it's like? And it might even be that that tiny little taste is really so teeny and small that it would be imperceptible to them, but they can feel the success of having tasted it. When my kids were little, I did taste tests with foods that they even knew and liked. We've done taste tests with different kinds of oranges, with apples, with chocolate chips. If you can turn taste testing into a practice that you engage with regularly, and it's foods that they know and they love, then doing that with a food that is unfamiliar to them can, again, help overcome that fear of trying something new. Taste tests are also a fantastic way that you can use to build their language skills around food. I have a link, I'll drop it below, to 100 words you can use to describe foods, and taste testing is a great way to build their language ability at mealtime. Second T in the C.H.A.T.T framework is talk. Speaking of language, the way we talk about food matters immensely. So, to the extent that you can, use descriptive and positive language, especially with new foods, but with everything that your kids are eating, to help them identify the elements that they like, identify the pieces of it that they don't, and to spark curiosity. For example, instead of just saying something like, oh, you should try this, I really think you're going to like it, describe it to them. I'd like you to try this orange. I know that you like sweet, juicy things, and this orange is that. It is sweet and it is juicy, and I suspect that you might like it. Okay, remember, helping your picky eater isn't something that is going to happen quickly. We do not have a quick fix for this. It is about creating a consistent environment where your child feels safe to explore and try new things at their own pace, where you encourage them without pressuring them, where you support them without bribing or coercing, and where you can use these evidence-based strategies and the C.H.A.T.T framework, if that sounds comfortable for you, to take the pressure off of yourself of how to actually do this with your picky eater. And hopefully you can all start enjoying mealtime together again. So remember, progress takes time. I think I've said this a million times in these videos, probably not a million, but a lot of times in these videos. Practice makes progress. We are not aiming for perfection, we are aiming for progress. Celebrate those small wins. Stay consistent in how you are offering food and how you're talking about it. Trust the process and build trust with your child. All of these things are going to help them become more comfortable with the process of tasting new things, which often is the underlying cause of picky eating. If you want more tips and support, you can check out my blog or join our Flossom community where we talk about this all the time. Together, we can make mealtime less about stress and more about connection. You've got this.